Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second training session within the BJA STOP School Violence Grant Program. My name is Tracy Dievenbach, and I am the Assistant Director at Assel Grant Services. Throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to work with a variety of organizations, including school districts of all sizes, universities, and nonprofits. My expertise lies in grant writing and reviewing with a real heavy focus on federal funding opportunities. Last year alone, my reviewing team reviewed proposals for nearly 20 different federal agencies, including the Department of Justice, as well as pass-through funding from Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. I'm excited to be here with you today to lead you through an in-depth walkthrough of the STOP Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, and the application components. Like the last training, at the end of today's session, you'll receive a homework assignment to be completed prior to our next training session. So our learning objectives today will really focus on increasing the understanding on the background of the BJA STOP funds and federal requirements, the core elements of this Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, as you'll hear me call it throughout this webinar, and again, the application components. I will share best practices in developing high-quality programs and highly competitive proposals, and highlight key resources, tools, and templates to assist you in this process of developing the proposal. Okay, so let's start with background on the STOP program. The STOP program stands for Students, Teachers, and Officers Preventing School Violence. It was created as a result of the Stop School Violence Act. This act was signed into law in March 2018 and was born really out of growing concerns about school safety and gun violence in the United States after several high-profile school shootings, including Sandy Hook Elementary. The act authorized the Bureau of Justice Assistance, or BJA, to manage a grant program that would support efforts by states, local units of government, and federally recognized Indian tribes to prevent and reduce school violence. The Stop School Violence Act provides funding for both the Bureau of Justice Assistance, or BJA, and the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, or COPS, both to address school safety. However, there are very distinct differences between the two in the areas, including eligibility, partner involvement, activities, and allowable expenses. The key difference I really want to point out here is in the scope of activities. BJA STOP funds, as we're discussing today, may not be used to purchase target hardening equipment, such as cameras or security systems, nor to hire armed security officers or school resource officers. This is different than the COPS funding. Additionally, it's important to know that awards made under this NOFO are funded under legal authority provided by the Department of Justice Appropriations Act 2024, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Supplemental Appropriations Act, and the 28 U.S. Code Section 530C. This is important because grants are distributed according to the legal guidelines set by these laws, and all awarded funds must be in compliance with these laws. So the purpose of the BJA Stop School Violence Funding Opportunity is to support school safety by implementing solutions to enhance school climate, establish school-based behavioral threat assessment or intervention teams to identify violence and risk, introduce technologies like anonymous reporting tools and systems, and apply other evidence-based strategies to prevent violence. The goal is to equip K-12 school safety by providing students and teachers with the tools they need to recognize, respond quickly to, and prevent acts of violence and ensure a positive school climate. The program funds some 460 agencies to implement safety measures in schools nationwide. BJA has been awarding funds through the STOP program since 2018. You can find examples of past successful projects on the link here in this slide. Additionally, again, at the end of today's session, in addition to the homework assignment, you should also receive a redacted example of a successful application. You can also go to this link to see some excerpts on some of the past successful projects. Examples include a project to implement multi-tiered system of support framework with the social emotional learning assessments, strategies, and training. A project to hire new interventionist staff and mental health first aid training for staff. A project to design and implement threat assessment case management tool. And another project to implement an anonymous reporting system and response management system, and to hire a new safety coordinator. So let's talk about some of the basic things you need to understand about the BJA STOP grant, including deadlines, project periods, funding rate ranges, and the amounts. First and foremost, it's crucial to know the deadlines. For this solicitation, the fiscal year 2025, the NOFO was released in mid-January. And as you learned from the last session, there are two key deadlines, which are part of the two-step submission process. Step 1 is the grants.gov deadline, which is March 27, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Two documents are required for this submission: the application for federal assistance standard form, or SF 424, and a disclosure of lobbying activities, or SFLLL. Step 2 is the Just Grants deadline. This is April 3rd, 2025, and the time is 8:59 p.m. Eastern Time. This is the full application submission in Just Grants, which includes all of the application components, such as the narrative, attachment, budget, etc. Step 1 must be completed as soon as possible in order to be able to log in and gain access to the Just Grants system. In the SF 424, you will enter the name and contact information of the individual who will complete the application in Just Grants, and then within 48 hours after the submission of Step 1, this individual receives a series of grants.gov email notifications, as discussed in the previous training. Then, within 24 hours after receipt of those email confirmations from grants.gov, the authorized organization representative will receive the email from Just Grants with the login instructions. The applicant is then going to be able to proceed to Step 2 and start completing the application in Just Grants. It is critical to gain access, to submit early so that you can gain access to Just Grants. And then updates can always be made to the SF 424 when you go to do the actual submission, including things like if the requested funding amount has changed from when you did the Step 1, or the project title, or the type of applicant. And revisions could also be made to the SFLLL. A revised version would just need to be uploaded in additional documents. It's important to remember not to delete any of the previous versions that you submitted in grants.gov in the Step 1 process. You would just need to revise the versions of the SF 424 or additional information of the SFLLL. It's highly recommended that applicants complete the application package in Just Grants well in advance of the deadline. OJP recommends at least 48 hours prior to the Just Grants deadline. As best practice, we like to set internal deadlines 7 days prior to the federal application deadline. Let's now take a look at eligibility requirements for BJA STOP. Eligible applicants fall under two categories. Category 1 includes state governments or public and state-controlled institutions of higher education. Category 2 includes city, township, county, or federally recognized Native American tribal governments, nonprofits, regardless of their 501c3 status with the IRS, other than institutions of higher education, private institutions of higher education, and independent school districts. Private K through 12 schools, including private charter schools, can apply as nonprofits. Public charter schools should apply as independent school districts. Additionally, applicants may propose to use the grant to contract with or subaward to local education agencies, nonprofit organizations, units of local government, or tribal organizations. The award amount is dependent upon which category the applicant falls under. States can apply for up to $2 million, while applicants under Category 2, including school districts, can apply for up to $1 million. Based on last year's solicitation, BJA anticipated making up to 10 awards in Category 1 and up to 69 in Category 2. To give you an example of last year's, in 2024, there were a total of 79 BJA STOP awards granted, totaling over $83 million. Now, we've talked about the purpose of the STOP grants. Let's take a look at the areas and activities BJA is looking to fund. The first area is to develop and operate technology solutions. Activities include anonymous reporting systems for threats of school violence, such as mobile telephone apps, hotlines, websites, or other school safety technology solutions for accurate identification of danger. Area 2 is to develop and implement multidisciplinary behavioral threat assessment, or BTA, and/or intervention teams. Now, BTA and intervention teams must be multidisciplinary and should coordinate with law enforcement agencies, behavioral health specialists, community stakeholders, and school personnel. Engaging the community is a crucial component of BJA STOP grants, and you'll see this as we go throughout this solicitation, each of these deliverable areas. Applicants seeking to implement BTA activities must partner with a research. So this work must be done in conjunction with a research partner or evaluator who can track data and the demographic characteristics of those who undergo assessments, as well as referral results of those assessments, and document services provided after each assessment, and then review the data and evaluations to ensure that follow-up services are provided and that there is no disparate impact based on race, ethnicity, or disability. Area 3 is to train school personnel and educate students on preventing school violence, including strategies to improve school climate. Trainings for school officials can include intervening and responding to individuals in mental health crisis, suicide prevention, bullying prevention, social emotional learning, and improving access to school-based behavioral health services. Resources and strategies for responding to students in mental health crisis must be trauma-informed, protect student privacy rights, and importantly, too, involve mental health professionals at all stages of training and in practice. When proposing trainings, schools and districts really need to consider the different audiences for these trainings and partners that they might need, such as youth-serving organizations, mental health service agencies, and law enforcement. They should be included in these trainings to reinforce the messages throughout the community. Additionally, because school safety concepts and plans cannot be learned in one training, it's important that trainings and learning is continuous and built through professional development. And then lastly, as part of full school community engagement efforts, applicants are really encouraged to include students in school safety initiatives through activities like forming school safety clubs, hosting listening sessions with student councils, and engaging students in developing promotional materials as some examples. Engaging the students in the community in this work provides valuable input from their perspective and really promotes collaboration and this shared responsibility for creating school and implementing school safety. Area 4 is to provide specialized training or create specialized non-training policies for law enforcement who work in schools and/or with school-age populations, such as school resource officers and probation officers. You can see here on this slide all of the training topics and non-training activities. Some of the trainings that should be included are basics of mental health awareness, conflict resolution, crisis intervention, problem solving, restorative justice principles and practices, and implications of trauma and trauma-informed interaction. You can see the full list outlined in the solicitation or the NOFO. There are also additional training topics such as incident reporting and data collection, procedural justice, multi-tiered systems of support such as positive behavioral interventions and supports, or PBIS, de-escalation and conflict resolution, Family and Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, training on individualized education programs such as training on Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And there are more topics also outlined in the NOFO. Non-training activities may include policy development specific to law enforcement, policy development and training to identify school disciplinary issues and situations where law enforcement may be necessary to protect physical safety, policy development regarding the limited circumstances in which arrest is necessary, policy development around conflict resolution, or the development of performance metrics to measure implementation of policy, or enhancing data collection to support transparency and tracking measures. Area 5 is hiring school support personnel such as climate specialists, school psychologists, school social workers, school-based interrupters, and others who directly support the prevention of school violence. Hires can work independently in the school or as part of a school resource officer co-responder model. Applicants proposing to hire staff must state in their application what steps they will take to sustain the position when the grant funds end. Mechanisms to support dedicated staff for staff training, hiring a full-time safety coordinator, and setting time aside for implementation and sustainability planning should also be included in the application. Note again, as I said earlier, BJA STOP funds may not be used to hire new school resource officers. They can be used to pay overtime to existing officers who are performing duties as part of the grant that are outside of their scope of normal job duties. Now, this means that if an applicant is seeking funds for overtime pay for existing school resource officers, there may be justification within the appropriate sections of the narrative and budget justification proving that these duties and tasks to be performed are directly related to the project and are above and beyond their normal responsibilities. It is important to also identify the specific training that any new hires will receive or may need to already have prior to being hired to ensure their readiness to work with students. And lastly, for applicants that implement behavioral threat assessments or intervention teams or operating technology solutions, it will be important to ensure that implementation strategies, policies, and protocols address critical issues, including student privacy, data security, race, national origin, disability, religion, and sex-based discrimination and bias. Training and ramp up for these new hires needs to be considered. Area 6 is implement community violence intervention strategies in a school-based setting. This can include partnerships with community-based organizations and community violence intervention practitioners to reduce violent crime in and around schools. It may include implement strategies such as Safe Passages Program, an approach to violence prevention, or other types of evidence-based programs that prevent community violence. Area 7 is to implement simulation-based experiential learning. Applicants may implement training and professional development for faculty and staff through the use of fully immersive virtual reality-based technology. The training should improve responses to school-based incidents such as bullying and other classroom management scenarios, and be immersive simulations where participants, through a virtual world, face a series of linked scenarios that require them to make critical decisions and overcome challenges using evidence-based de-escalation and crisis intervention practices. This technology may not be used to simulate law enforcement or school responses to an active shooter training. Technology implemented through this effort must include a research partner to assist in training development, monitor and track delivery, and evaluate outcomes. The next area is to partner with law enforcement to develop information sharing practices and protocols that allow law enforcement, school practitioners, community-based support service providers, and others to regularly share information around violent crime outside of the school environment. The intent here is to create a Handle with Care program for students. Handle with Care is trauma-informed, cross-system, collaborative programs aimed at ensuring that children who are exposed to adverse events receive appropriate interventions and have the opportunities they need to build resilience through positive relationships with teachers and first responders. Examples of this type of information sharing may include providing the school with the location of major crimes, homicides, non-fatal shootings within the school catchment area. The school implements individual, class, and whole school trauma-sensitive strategies so that potentially traumatized children are then handled with care. And the last area is to support school-based diagnostic mental health services or school-based mental health treatment services to provide school-based assessment services that will evaluate students for mental health disorders and school-based mental health treatment services for students experiencing mental health disorders. OJP sets priority areas to further its mission, which is determined by a number of factors, including legislative mandates, data and research, current events and trends, and best practices. These priorities may be considered by the agency when making awarding decisions. The BJA STOP School Violence, NOFO, identifies digital trust as a priority in the fiscal year 2025 NOFO. Page 16 of the NOFO states that applicants proposing to use grant funds to support technological enhancements directly or through BJA Training and Technical Assistance, or TTA, may receive priority consideration if their proposal addresses tenets of digital trust, such as how the technology will be carefully implemented through the training of personnel and the setting of enforcement of policies governing its use to ensure that it contributes to positive outcomes for public safety, the community, and/or the criminal justice system. And also how the applicant will safeguard privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties throughout the duration of the project period. In order to receive priority consideration, there must be evidence in the narrative and through the work of the project and the things that will be done to ensure these digital trust components are incorporated. This might look like activities that are defined within the narrative and timeline, partnerships, funding sources, and or allocated funding to it. Now let's take a look at the application components for the BJA STOP proposal. On this slide and the next one, you'll see a list of each of the components. Again, here I show you the two-step submission process, and you can see step 2 of the process is the bulk of the application. The next slide here shows the remaining additional application components and the disclosures and assurances. There are a lot of components, as you can see, to the BJA STOP application. Let's talk about what needs to be worked early. Because BJA STOP funds are intended to support projects and programs that are a part of an applicant's comprehensive school safety plan or broader safety strategy, there are critical steps that applicants need to consider and prioritize early on in the process. First, data collection. Understand the needs of the school community is imperative. Early data collection lays the groundwork for effective project planning. It's best practice to use data to guide your program design. At the end of the session today, you will receive a data needs worksheet to be completed prior to the next section. Such data will include things like student and community demographics and characteristics, surveys from teachers, school safety personnel, parents, and students on school climate, risky behaviors, and safety needs. The next is partnerships. BJA STOP funds are really designed to enhance and support collaboration with the community and specifically local law enforcement as really part of a cohesive approach to violence prevention. Evidence of these partnerships is required through memorandums of understanding and signed letters of support, and thus reaching out to these partners early on is critical to ensure you have conversations about their role, begin drafting letters and MOUs. Project design. Developing a clear project design is really crucial from the start. This needs to be something that is also considered very early on. Applicants should define their project goals, objectives, activities, and including the evidence-based strategies that they're going to use and deliverables which align with the NOFO in an impactful and meaningful way. Budget planning should also not be overlooked in the early stages. I'll cover this more in a later presentation, but it's important to know there are layers of federal financial regulations and requirements that must be followed when applying for federal funding and BJA STOP funds. This includes adherence to the Code of Federal Regulations, the DOJ Financial Guide, and program-specific funding requirements within the BJA STOP program. Applicants must be aware of things like allowable versus unallowable, contracts versus subawards, and regulations within the two. The budget must align with the funding objectives and be detailed, accurate, and realistic. Also of early importance is the Financial Management and Systems of Internal Controls questionnaire. This questionnaire is a required component and is designed to assess the applicant's financial management practices and internal controls to ensure compliance. Depending on the responses in this form, the applicant may be required to provide further information and complete additional forms with their submission. It's very important that the financial officer or other designated appropriate financial staff log into Just Grants as soon as possible to access and begin working on this form. Let's talk about the different sections of the project narrative. The first section is the need, the statement of the problem, and the description of the issue. What critical issue or problem will be addressed? The section is worth up to 20% of the total criteria. As mentioned, collecting data is foundational to identifying the project need. You will use this data to justify and emphasize the importance of the project. This includes data analysis. What story is the data telling you about the prevalence or risk of school violence and the safety concerns? What are the gaps or weaknesses in the existing services, programs, structures? What impact is the problem and gap having on students, on the community? Why is it important? How significant is it? Stakeholder engagement is crucial in both identifying the issue and as a part of the solution. What are the stakeholders telling you about the problem, including students, parents, teachers, school administrators, school safety personnel, local law enforcement, mental health professionals, and community organizations? Think about how your project will collaborate with and involve partners and stakeholders in the development and ongoing implementation and evaluation of your program.
The next section is project goals and objectives. In this section, you'll identify the proposed solution and how it will address the identified need and the purpose of the funding opportunity. The section is worth up to 10%, and remember, it must align with the required goals, objectives, and deliverables form that must be completed in Just Grants. The next section is project design and implementation. This is the meat of your proposal, of your narrative, if you will, and it is worth up to 30 points of total criteria. The criteria focuses on ensuring that applicants have a well-designed project with very specific activities that clearly address the identified needs. This slide here outlines the key things to address in this section. It's important to remember that the proposed project and specific actions to be taken must be relevant to the identified needs, schools, and populations to be served. Engage these target populations, key partners, and stakeholders in the project, as I just said earlier. A 3-month planning period is required to help lay the groundwork and position the program for success. Partnerships, including law enforcement, should be evident in the narrative and have attached MOUs and/or letters of support. The proposed project must be part of the larger school or district safety plan and strategy. Applicants must complete a timeline form, as well as the goals, objectives, and deliverables form that I just mentioned. Both the timeline and goals and objectives form should be described in the project design and implementation section so that there is clear alignment between the two. The next section is capabilities and competencies. This section should ensure that the applicant, partners, and key individuals have the capacity, capability, and commitment to deliver the proposed project and achieve the stated goals. Applicants should describe the structures, systems, processes, resources, and skills that are in place to deliver the proposed project. The roles and qualifications of key individuals should be described, ensuring the team is equipped to carry out the project activities and objectives. The role of each partner should be clearly defined, and any resources or commitments to the project should also be defined. Collaboration and regular ongoing communication is expected among schools and districts and their partners, including law enforcement. This should be evident in this section. The plan for collecting the data required for the NOFO's performance measures is worth up to 5%. This section has criterion that is designed to evaluate the applicant's understanding of their performance data reporting requirements and their plan to collect this required data. Award recipients will be required to report on performance data in Just Grants that is directly related to the goals and objectives of this NOFO. A link to these measures can be found here on this slide. Applicants do not need to submit performance data with the application. Rather, they need to prove they have a solid plan and systems in place to collect, track, and accurately report and analyze the data to guide and evaluate their project's impact. And this includes identifying who is going to collect the data and will be responsible for the performance measures, how the data will be collected, and how it will be used to guide the project's efforts and assess impact. The next section is the plan for sustainability, which is up to 10%. This section should ensure that the project or technology that is to be implemented will continue to operate after funding has ended. Applicants should take into consideration the resources, including financial, human, and physical resources needed for long-term sustainability. It's important not to assume that additional funding will be available under BJA STOP School Violence. Identify specific sources of funding, including state, local, or private funding, to ensure that you can continue your program or technology beyond the funding period. And it's important to also take here into consideration the continuation of partnerships and ongoing evaluation and improvement. The next section is the budget. It's worth up to 15% of total criteria. Crafting a budget that aligns perfectly with the goals and objectives of the proposed project and the funding opportunity is really vital for a successful application. In doing so, it's important to consider what should be included and excluded in the budget, along with specific limitations. Applicants must complete the web-based budget form, which includes projected line item cost with standard budget categories and thorough and clear descriptions of every cost that is listed. Proposed budgets must be reasonable, allocable, and necessary for the project activities. Standard budget categories include personnel cost, which covers salaries and wages for project staff who are directly involved in this project, fringe benefits associated with these project staff, travel expenses related to project activities, equipment cost, supplies, subawards, contracts, other direct cost, and indirect cost. Travel expenses within the travel category must include transportation, lodging, and meals for the applicant's employees. Applicants should budget for one visit to Washington, D.C. during the project period. This trip is expected to be 2 days, 1 night, and it must include at least one representative from the organization. There are specific considerations and requirements that need to be taken into account for subawards and procurement contracts. It is important to read through the NOFO and the DOJ financial guide. For example, entities managing subawards are required to conduct a risk assessment of all subrecipients, pass on all award conditions to the subrecipient, and monitor each subrecipient. Excluded from the budget are certain costs, such as items considered to be deterrent measures or target hardening. As I explained earlier, this might include things like security cameras, metal detectors, gates, and fencing. Additionally, BJA STOP funds cannot be used to address violence on campuses of institutions of higher education. While incentives, stipends, and foods are generally unallowable costs for BJA, STOP funds may allow for such costs with prior approval. Applicants must provide written justification with the submitted application. This summary underscores the significance of meticulous budget planning and ensures that every dollar spent contributes directly to the success of the proposed project and adheres to program requirements, federal requirements, and limitations. As discussed previously, there are a number of other application components. Key ones are listed here on this slide. A proposal abstract is required with submission. It's limited to 400 words and should include the project purpose, primary activities, expected outcomes, service area, intended beneficiaries, and subrecipients if known. It should also include any priority considerations. The abstract is completed in the Just Grants web-based form, and there are specific guidelines to follow within the NOFO. Examples include writing in paragraph form, no bullets, and in third person. Applicants must submit the project goals, objectives, deliverables, and timeline in Just Grants web-based forms, which again points to the need to really log into the system early. Objectives should be SMART, specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, and timely, and must be clearly linked to the project goal. Resumes of key personnel who will work on the proposed project should be submitted as a separate attachment. It's important to note that the resumes, as well as project timeline and the goals and objectives form, do not count towards the narrative page limit of 15 pages. Resumes will ultimately help reviewers assess the team's ability to effectively implement the project and achieve its proposed outcomes. Signed letters of support may be submitted for entities who will be supporting the project and should be submitted as one separate attachment to the application. MOUs and other supportive documents may be provided. MOUs should describe the entities entering the partnership, its purpose,
the partner roles and responsibilities, and budget information. MOUs should be signed and dated by the school official who will have general education oversight and decision-making authority, such as a board chair or superintendent, and be signed by the lead law enforcement agency if law enforcement is part of the multidisciplinary team. Draft MOUs are acceptable with the expectation that the partnership and the MOU will be finalized during the 3-month planning period. The dates of the MOU should either cover the term of the award or include language regarding an annual renewal of the agreement. Although letters of support and MOUs are optional, partnerships are a key component of this funding. Providing concrete evidence of collaboration with law enforcement, community organizations, and other stakeholders ensures a comprehensive approach that promotes buy-in, aligns with best practices, and really supports long-term sustainability. As mentioned, applicants should prioritize the completion of the financial management and systems of internal controls questionnaires early on. This form assesses an applicant's strengths and weaknesses in their financial management systems and practices to really ensure compliance with federal grant requirements. As I said earlier, additional information may be required depending on the applicant's responses within this form. For example, if an applicant is designated as high risk, an applicant disclosure and justification form must also be submitted as a separate attachment. OJP will use this during the review process. Responses within this questionnaire also deem if the disclosure of process related to executive compensation will be required. If an applicant is requesting employee compensation, which includes salary plus cash bonuses at a rate that exceeds 110% of the annual maximum salary payable to a member of the federal government's senior executive services, a waiver request and justification for this employee compensation must be submitted with the application. I've included a link to the salary table that is referred to here on this slide. If the applicant is requesting indirect cost and has a federally approved indirect cost rate agreement, a current indirect cost rate agreement must be attached and submitted with the application. As mentioned, if an applicant is requesting funds for incentives, stipends, or food, prior approval is required and justification must be provided with the submitted application. For proposed contracts and subrecipients related to the project, applicants should include a list of contracts providing details such as the vendor name and location, contract amount, services provided, and contract duration. If research and/or evaluation are proposed in the project, the applicant may need to demonstrate independence and integrity, including safeguards for both the research and/or evaluation project proposed in the application. Other disclosures and assurances include disclosure of lobbying activities, applicant disclosure of duplication and cost items for any pending federal grants or cooperative agreements to support the same project that is being proposed, or cover any of the same cost items in the proposed budget. DOJ certified standard assurances, DOJ certifications regarding lobbying, debarment, suspension, and other responsibility matters, drug-free workplace requirements, law enforcement and community policing, and applicant disclosure and justification for DOJ high-risk grantees. This slide here provides a list and links to guides and resources, which I've mentioned throughout this training today. These will be critical in preparing and submitting your application. Additional information is provided in both the OJP Application Resources Guide as well as the DOJ Grants Financial Guide. The BJA Stop School Violence webpage provides an overview of the funding and links to resources, including frequently asked questions. There are also several Just Grants resources, including an application submission training page. As you know, Each of the trainings in this series are accompanied by assignments to help guide you through the development of your application. Today's assignment, as I mentioned earlier, includes a data needs worksheet that is to be completed prior to the next training session. Additionally, an example of a successful proposal will be provided for you to read and review. Thank you for joining us today as we did an in-depth exploration of the fiscal year 2025 BJA Stop School Violence NOFO. We covered the application components, narrative sections, attachments, and all of the requirements to get you started on preparing a high-quality application. I look forward to our next training session where we will dive deep into the needs data and logic models. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.